The storm clawed at Emily's coat, the icy wind slicing across her cheeks like glass. She lowered her head and pressed forward, the crunch of her boots swallowed by the roar of the blizzard. It felt almost fitting nature itself, echoing the storm inside her chest. After 12 grueling hours in the hospital, she should have been numb with exhaustion, but her mind replayed the same memory, the moment her fiancé's words shattered her future. Each snowflake that stung her face seemed to whisper what she already knew: she was utterly alone. The streets were abandoned, as if the world itself had turned its back on her. Emily wrapped her arms tighter around herself, but no coat could shield her from the hollow ache gnawing within. She thought of the ring she had slipped off her finger only weeks ago, how small it had felt in her palm compared to the weight of betrayal. Every step home felt like trudging deeper into a silence she no longer knew how to escape. Then it came, thin, piercing, impossible. A cry fragile, yet sharp enough to cut through the storm. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was not the groan of shifting ice or the howl of the wind. It was unmistakable. A baby's cry. Her stomach dropped and her pulse hammered. She strained her ears, waiting, praying she hadn't imagined it. The sound came again, carried faint but insistent across the snow, tugging at a part of her heart she thought had been buried. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as snowflakes clung to her lashes. "It's just the storm. It has to be." But even as she tried to convince herself, the cry rose again, louder this time, urgent. She spun in place, her heart thundering, her rational mind screaming it was impossible, yet the sound demanded she listen. Her breath puffed in frantic clouds as she stepped off the path, boots sinking into untouched snow. Fear pressed heavy in her chest, but something deeper, something primal pulled her forward. The storm shrieked around her, but her ears clung to that cry, as if the child's voice had anchored her very soul. Through the blur of white movement flickered. A broad shadow loomed ahead, dark against the snow, shifting with unsettling purpose. Emily narrowed her eyes, her pulse quickening. The shape was massive, furred, its shoulders hunched, and in its mouth, or was it cradled gently? Something small squirmed, its cry rising again. Emily's breath snagged in her chest as the shadow broke through the swirling white. It wasn't a monster, it wasn't a man. It was a German shepherd, its fur clumped with ice, its eyes gleaming like twin lanterns in the dark. The animal stepped forward, careful, deliberate, and lowered its head. Between its jaws, cradled with shocking gentleness, was a bundle. When the shepherd released it onto the snow, the muffled wail of a baby rang out, thin and desperate. Emily staggered back, her heart pounding, as reality tore through the storm's blur. Her pulse thundered. A dogger, stray, wild-eyed and powerful, stood before her, and yet all she could hear was the tiny cry. The baby flailed weakly, a scrap of life wrapped in damp cloth, its face reddened by cold. Emily's every instinct screamed caution. One wrong move, and the shepherd might turn. But another instinct, the one that had carried her through years of nursing, rose, stronger. The child would not survive another minute in this freezing wind. Her fear warred with duty, but her feet moved before her mind caught up. Emily dropped to her knees, snow soaking through her jeans, and pulled her scarf free with trembling hands. It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if the words were for the baby or the beast watching her. Carefully, she wrapped the cloth around the infant, tucking it close against her chest. The shepherd didn't move. Its chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, its golden eyes locked on her, as though weighing her worth with every heartbeat. The shepherd took a single step closer. Emily stiffened, clutching the baby tighter. But the dog's movements held no menace, only vigilance. Its ears twitched at every distant sound, body angled slightly between her and the storm, as though shielding them both. It was not relinquishing its responsibility. No growl left its throat. Instead, its presence pressed against her like a silent vow. It would allow her care, but not without its watchful guard. Emily's mind spun. Who would abandon a child here, in a storm like this? And how? How had a shepherd, alone and nameless, taken it into its care? The thought unsettled and amazed her in equal measure. She glanced at the dog, her lips parting with questions she could not ask. Was it a chance, instinct, or something deeper, strange, unspoken understanding between two creatures desperate to protect the same fragile life? Or tangled with fear, and yet she felt less alone. The faint wail of sirens drifted through the wind, distant but growing. Emily's heart leaped. Help was near, but they wouldn't last exposed much longer. "We have to move," she murmured. Pulling the bundled baby close, she rose shakily, glancing at the shepherd. The dog's gaze held hers for a breath, then it fell in step beside her, as if the decision had already been made. Together, woman and beast turned into the storm, bound by a fragile, urgent mission: survival. Emily's hands shook as she pushed the apartment door shut against the howling wind. Snow still clung to her coat, but her focus was only on the tiny bundle pressed to her chest. She hurried across the room, laying the swaddled baby onto the couch before burying it in layers of blankets. The child whimpered weakly, the sound piercing through the storm, still echoing in her ears. Behind her, the shepherd padded softly across the floor, stopping at the door as though it were still standing guard against the outside world. Its amber eyes never wavered, fixed on Emily and the fragile life she cradled. The storm may have been shut out, but its presence remained a silent tension between human, child, and dog. Emily's chest rose and fell with uneven breaths as she turned to face the animal. It was large, powerful, its thick coat dripping with melted snow that pooled on the floor. Yet it made no move toward her. Instead, it lowered its body slightly, sitting near the entrance like a sentinel, unwilling to abandon its post. Her fear wavered. She had expected snarls or sudden lunges, but there was none of that. The shepherd's head tilted slightly, its gaze calm but unwavering. It wasn't asking for food or warmth, it was waiting, watching, protecting. Emily clutched the child closer, realizing with unease that the dog wasn't simply staying, it was choosing to stay. The baby stirred again, its thin cry cutting through the air. Emily moved quickly, rocking the child against her shoulder, whispering comfort through trembling lips. The shepherd rose to its feet instantly, pacing back and forth across the room. Its nails tapped against the wooden floor, the movement anxious, almost agitated. Emily's heart skipped. For a brief moment she braced for aggression, but instead she noticed the animal's ears perked, its eyes darting toward the baby as though every cry pierced its own nerves. When the baby finally calmed in her arms, the shepherd stopped pacing, sitting once more with a soft huff as if reassured by Emily's care. Emily sank onto the couch, staring at the child's peaceful face. Her phone sat on the table, the glow of its screen tempting her. She knew she should call someone: the authorities, the hospital, anyone who could explain why a baby had been left in the storm. Under the guard of a stray dog, her thumb hovered over the screen, but she couldn't press it. The thought of strangers arriving, taking the baby away, taking the shepherd away. It twisted her stomach. The law demanded action, but instinct urged silence. She wasn't ready, not tonight. For now, all she could do was listen to the steady breathing of the baby and the low rumble of the dog's chest. Hours turned into days as the storm refused to relent. With no choice but to wait, Emily found herself sharing her home with both child and shepherd. Small moments became threads of connection. She tore scraps of bread and meat for the dog, watching as it ate politely, never demanding more. At night, she pulled blankets closer around the baby, only to notice the shepherd inch nearer to curling, its body against the couch as if offering its own warmth. Once, she woke to the faint sound of a soft nuzzle, the dog pressing its nose gently against the child's tiny hand. These moments, simple yet profound, stitched together a fragile bond. Fear slowly bent into trust, and trust began to feel like belonging. One night, as the storm softened to a whisper outside, Emily found herself drifting into dreams of a life she dared not imagine. She pictured mornings filled with laughter, the baby crawling across the floor, the shepherd standing proudly nearby as if it had always been part of their family. For the first time in years, she felt her heart thaw from loneliness. The idea of us instead of just me was intoxicating. But even as she dreamed, a quiet ache reminded her this life wasn't hers to claim. Happiness, she feared, was only temporary. Reality pressed hard the next morning. The storm was breaking, the roads clearing, and with that came the inevitability of questions. Who abandoned the baby? Why had the shepherd delivered it here? And when the world came knocking, would it allow her to keep what fate had dropped at her door? She glanced between the two souls resting in her care. They weren't hers, not really, but her heart whispered otherwise, binding her to them even as uncertainty loomed like a shadow. The apartment had grown too quiet. The storm outside reduced to nothing but dripping icicles. For a fleeting moment, Emily believed peace had settled. Then knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the walls, sharp and final. Emily's heart leaped to her throat. The baby stirred, the shepherd's ears pricked. Another knock, firmer this time, shattered the fragile cocoon she had built. Her stomach tightened, dread washing over her. Someone had come for answers, for the truth. And Emily realized, trembling, that her brief sanctuary was about to be torn wide open. Blue and red lights cut through the swirling snow, their glare bouncing across Emily's trembling hands as she held the baby close. The quiet cocoon she had, built over days, shattered in an instant. Tires crunched against ice, car doors slammed, and heavy boots marched toward her building. The shepherd stiffened, ears pricked, a low growl rumbling in its chest, as though it understood the threat wasn't just outside. It was at the threshold of their fragile family. Emily's breath caught. Not now, please, not like this. Every instinct screamed to hide, but the knock that followed left no room for escape. She opened the door slowly, her face pale, heart racing, as two uniformed officers stepped inside, bringing the storm with them. "Ma'am," one officer said, gently, though his eyes carried the weight of practiced suspicion, "the baby you're holding, he was abandoned during a robbery gone wrong 2 nights ago." Emily's chest tightened, her fingers gripping the blankets as though her touch alone could shield him. The second officer scanned the shepherd, then exchanged a wary glance with his partner. "There's reason to believe this dog may belong to those who fled," he added. Emily's eyes widened. The thought felt impossible, The shepherd had done nothing but protect. Yet doubt hung in the room like icy fog, twisting loyalty into suspicion, making her world tilt between love and fear. "We'll need to take the child," the first officer said firmly, "and the animal, for everyone's safety." Emily staggered back, as if struck. "No, you don't understand. That dog saved him, saved us." Her voice cracked under the weight of desperation. The shepherd, sensing her fear, pressed closer, its body forming a barrier between her and the men. "Procedures are clear," the officer replied, softer now, yet unyielding. "Until we sort this out, neither can stay here." Emily's heart pounded. Logic demanded she comply, but her soul screamed otherwise. "They're not just child and dog anymore. They're mine, my family." Her instincts rose like fire. She couldn't let them go without a fight. The younger officer narrowed his eyes. "You're telling me you just found them? That this shepherd isn't dangerous?" He gestured at the animal, whose steady gaze followed his every move. "Looks like a trained guard dog to me. Loyal to the wrong people, maybe. That makes it unpredictable." Emily's stomach twisted. His words planted fear like a thorn, not because she believed them, but because she knew others might. One false move, one growl misread, and they would label the shepherd a threat. Her voice faltered. "You're wrong. He's not what you think." But the shadow of doubt stretched long across the room. Before anyone could speak again, the shepherd's head snapped toward the frosted window. A shape moved in the darkness outside, slender, deliberate, wrong. Emily's breath froze. "Someone's out there," she whispered. The officers turned, hands hovering near their weapons. The storm had cloaked a predator in its white veil, and now the danger Emily feared was no longer imagined. Her pulse raced as the figure shifted closer, pressing the night itself against her glass. Suddenly, it wasn't the shepherd's loyalty. In question, it was their survival. All over again, with a snarl that shattered the silence, the shepherd lunged for the door. It burst into the snow, fur bristling, teeth bared, the embodiment of raw devotion. The lurking figure stumbled back, caught off guard, before vanishing into the storm's shadows. For a moment, chaos ruled. The baby wailed, the officers shouted, but clarity struck Emily's heart like lightning. The shepherd hadn't hesitated, hadn't chosen survival for itself. It had chosen her. It had chosen the child. Its loyalty had spoken louder than any doubt. Tears blurred Emily's vision as she turned to the officers. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling but unbroken. "Don't take them from me. You saw what just happened. This isn't just a dog. This isn't just a baby left behind. We've survived because we found each other, because we became something more, family, and no law, no rule can measure what that means." Her words hung heavy in the room, carried not by logic, but by the undeniable truth of love and survival intertwined. As night surrendered, the storm broke, revealing the soft blush of dawn. Snow dripped from rooftops like melted sorrow, and the first light spilled across Emily's weary face. The officers exchanged a long, silent look, then lowered their guard. The baby stirred. The shepherd lay protectively at Emily's feet, and for the first time in days, hope felt possible. Outside, danger had been pushed back into the shadows. Inside, a fragile but unshakable truth had been born. Love had already chosen them. The night was finally still. The blizzard had retreated, leaving behind only the hush of snow blanketing the streets. Inside, Emily cradled the baby as exhaustion weighed heavy but sweet upon her shoulders. The officers, softened now, explained. what her heart already suspected. The child's parents were unfit, entangled in lives of crime and neglect. For the first time in days, Emily felt the weight of fear ease, replaced by a fragile peace. Out of the storm's brutality, the possibility of a new beginning shimmered like dawn. Weeks slipped into one another, each day tethering Emily more deeply to the little boy who had entered her life by chance. Court papers arrived, crisp and official, yet Emily barely read the words. All she saw was his smile. All she heard was the way he laughed when she sang. Guardianship was granted, no longer temporary, no longer uncertain. He was hers to protect, hers to love. Emily's heart overflowed. Knowing her lonely apartment had finally found its heartbeat, the shepherd stayed close through every hearing, every sleepless night, his silent loyalty speaking more than words. When no one came forward to claim him, suspicion dissolved, replaced by recognition of his devotion. Emily looked into those amber eyes and made a decision she already knew in her soul he belonged with them. She signed the papers, placed her hand on his sturdy neck, and whispered the name that would define him, Guardian. The past no longer mattered, only their shared future did. Emily often caught herself marveling at how everything had changed. The quiet emptiness of her home had once mirrored the hollow ache inside her chest. Now, laughter spilled through the rooms, baby giggles echoing off walls that had known only silence. Guardian's paws clicked softly across the floor, always near, always watching. She had once thought she was merely surviving. Now she understood life had given her belonging. A family born not of blood, but of choice, trust, and unconditional love. On a golden spring afternoon, Emily sat on the porch, the air fragrant with new blossoms. The baby tumbled in the grass, giggling with delight as butterflies danced overhead. Nearby, Guardian stretched lazily, ears twitching but eyes always sharp, a silent protector even in peace. Emily watched the scene unfold, her heart swelling with gratitude. The storm felt like a lifetime ago. In its place was this: laughter, sunlight, and the steady presence of a dog who had saved them both. Emily held the baby close, Guardian resting at her feet, and breathed in the simple beauty of the moment. She realized her journey had never been about chance. It was about courage to open her door, love to nurture what others discarded, and trust in the bond that had found her in the storm. Her life was no longer defined by emptiness. It was defined by family, by a child's laughter, a dog's loyalty, and the unshakable truth that love always finds a way. Emily often thought back to that night, the snow pressing against her windows, the cry that shattered her silence, and the loyal shepherd who had appeared like a shadow out of the storm. What once felt like chaos had become the turning point of her life. She realized that life's greatest blessings rarely arrive with warning. They come disguised as burdens, disguised as fear, and reveal themselves only when we dare to open our hearts. What began as strangers, an abandoned child, a homeless dog, and a woman worn thin by loneliness, had blossomed into something unshakable. Emily understood now that family was not dictated by bloodlines, but by trust, sacrifice, and the courage to love without hesitation. The shepherd's loyalty, the child's laughter, her own newfound strength, all of it proved that compassion had the power to transform fear into belonging. Turning fractured lives into a home, Emily knew their story began with brokenness, a child without safety, a dog without a past, a woman without hope. Yet, from those fractured beginnings, they had built something whole. The hardships had not weakened them. They had forged them into something stronger. Healing, Emily realized, rarely arrives when expected, but always when it's most needed.